Dyslexia is a recognised disability in the UK. There have been many long debates over the years about how to define it, but the agreed upon Delphi definition by the British Dyslexia Association and other accredited associations is that dyslexia is a set of processing difficulties that affect the acquisition of reading and spelling. Just like most experiences in life, dyslexia can vary from person to person, not only symptoms but also in severity. There are, however, symptoms of dyslexia that are common signs in most individuals. In a school setting, it is important to identify and understand key signs of dyslexia within a classroom and between different age groups. This is due to symptoms varying between age groups. As an example, here are 16 potential indicators of dyslexia within an early years setting. Number 1, difficulty learning nursery rhymes. Number 2, difficulty paying attention, sitting still or listening to stories. 3, likes listening to stories that shows no interest in letters or words. 4, difficulty learning to sing or recite the alphabet. 5, a history of slow speech development. 6, mixes up words. 7, difficulty keeping simple rhythm. 8, finding it hard to multitask. 9, forgetting information such as names of friends, teachers and colours. 10, poor auditory discrimination. 11, confusion between directional words like up and down or left and right. Number 12, family history of dyslexia. Number 13, difficulty with sequencing. Number 14, substituting certain words. 15, appears to not be listening or paying attention. And finally, number 16, obvious good or bad days for no apparent reason. But what about later on a child's life? Well, later on in a child's school life, it can be harder to know and understand if certain symptoms are indications of dyslexia. The British Dyslexia Association, or the BDA, state that obvious signs of academic weakness alongside other strong abilities can be a sign of dyslexia. The association also describes this as a spiky profile. They list some general signs to look for as well: speed of processing, slow spoken and or written language, poor concentration, difficulty following instructions and forgetting words. With the signs, it is important to take into account unique experiences and difficulties that, on an individual level, all struggles may be different. At a secondary school age, a child can show a plethora of different behaviours and abilities that can potentially be signs of dyslexia. Just like with primary school children and the spiky profile, children in secondary school can show a combination of different weaknesses and strengths. What can be an indicator is the disparity between them. A student can show struggle with written work, i.e. grammar and note-taking, reading, such as confusion between words and lines on a page, as well as difficulty to process and recognise familiar words. Numeracy can be affected where a student may find mental arithmetic or reading and creating formula difficult. Other areas of difficulty can be through showing signs of slow processing and difficulty with memorization. Some students may also show behaviours such as high levels of disorganisation with lower recognisable concentration levels compared with fellow classmates, as well as excessive tiredness due to higher levels of effort needed to concentrate to function on a daily basis. As dyslexia falls under disability, this means it falls under ALN, or Additional Learning Needs. Since the Additional Learning Needs and Educational Tribunal in 2018, all individuals aged 0 to 25 need to have an independent development plan that involves both the individual in question and their parental figures. These plans are focused around the learner and are there to give an individual all the support they may need. But what support can be given to a child with dyslexia? A child with dyslexia in a school would be given extra support such as increased supervision within school hours, higher amount of breaks to help lower any chances of anxiety or feelings of being overwhelmed, emotional support when a child is struggling with certain areas of daily schooling. A child with dyslexia in a school would be given extra support such as increased supervision within school hours, higher amount of breaks to help lower any chances of anxiety or feelings of being overwhelmed, emotional support when a child is struggling with certain areas of daily schooling, as well as or more specific support specialised for children with dyslexia. These may include coloured cards to place over written text to allow visual differences between written words and the background, which is shown to improve dyslexia symptoms with comprehension. Increased text size is also shown to have this effect. How has ALN already affected children positively in schools? ALN can be used to positively affect a child's experience of school, not only with enjoyment, but also with their academic development. With the school system already within Wales, a phonological reading programme has already been set in place. This programme has given children the opportunity to read books with activities that promote their phonological awareness. The children reread the book and practice words that they are particularly struggling with. This gives children the opportunity to become familiar with certain words and develop their confidence. Data has shown that children who do participate in this programme have had substantial improvements on their reading and writing skills, with the addition of a care plan with families and staff taking time to slow down reading with children. This is also shown to be a very effective strategy in helping mitigate any processing difficulties a child with dyslexia may have. But what barriers are there in school and how can this affect a child? With ALN in the classroom, it is important that all teachers have received a certain level of training to be able to recognise the symptoms of dyslexia and to also understand how this disability can affect a child's behaviour in the classroom. Without enough training and support, a teacher may not be able to give a child all the support they need to not feel overwhelmed and for them to also be able to be successful and for them to be able to successfully deal and overcome any difficulties relating to their disability. Statistically speaking, children who are diagnosed with dyslexia have an increased risk of anxiety. The anxiety can lead to physical changes and consequently an avoidance of academic situations altogether, which could subsequently have a negative impact on a child's education. To lower the chances of anxiety being a negatively impacting factor, multiple breaks are needed to reduce the risk of a child being overwhelmed. But what stops a child from being supported? Well, in Wales, for a child to be given support through ALN, a diagnosis of dyslexia needs to be made. However, even with the NHS stating in 2022 that an earlier diagnosis, the more effective support will be. But for a child to be diagnosed with dyslexia, a few conditions need to be met. Firstly, a child needs to meet the minimum age requirement of 8 years old, as well as for a diagnosis of dyslexia, they also need to meet criteria level 4. This means that having an early diagnosis is harder as early symptoms of dyslexia also can overlap with other learning difficulties. All of these requirements are high, and so it makes it difficult for a diagnosis to be given. On top of that, financial situations of schools mean that they cannot allocate the recommended amount to effectively diagnose and support the children with dyslexia. What can be done in the future to help support children with dyslexia? As stated by the NHS, an early diagnosis is important to help increase how effective support can be. Well, due to the nature of getting a diagnosis in Wales of dyslexia, lowering the age requirement for a dyslexia diagnosis, as well as also lowering the criteria needed to be given a diagnosis, is required. However, it is also important to add that with a lowered requirement for dyslexia, an influx of children being diagnosed with dyslexia has a higher likelihood. With this, an increased budget to be given to schools would also be a good solution. This would not only help support other children with different ALN needs, but also help support children with dyslexia to get more support. This can also help boost training of teachers so that children are able to be supported more in the classroom. Thank you so much for listening.